recording for this particular session today with a few words from me, and then I'll be handing over the class to Ritvika. Before I do that, let us get into this particular class by making you understand that what we have done till now. We went into the history of income tax. We talked about the history, we talked about various aspects of income tax, we talked about Article 246 of the Constitution of India, and we talked about the union list, we talked about the state list, and we talked about the concurrent list. Now, before I go ahead, we have discussed all these aspects, but the theoretical notes of all these things, that is the union list, the state list, and the entries that we had talked about before, boys and girls, have not yet reached you. By tomorrow, the notes that are there for this particular unit will reach you. But one thing I would like to tell each and every person is that whatever case laws have been discussed under Article 246 of the Constitution and also under Article 265 and the doctrine of pith and substance that we talked about, and today the topic that we are taking on tax jurisprudence, right? On these particular topics, I would like you to refer to those particular case laws, take out the summary of the particular case laws and keep it with you, because that is the basic thing that we need to do. And for each and every uh, what you say case law, there should be some in-depth study being done by the student also by themselves. So before I start today's session on tax jurisprudence now, I would like to hand over the session now to uh, Ritvika, because as you remember, because all of them did not join when I was speaking before, was that in the previous session, when Aditya Kinger did talk about the Balsara case, he also said that the Balsara case was it was overwritten by another case. So today we will discuss that particular case now, with Ritvika taking that particular time to discuss it. And then as per the PPT that is now in front of you, we shall talk about that tax jurisprudence in the case of CIT versus Shelley products. I would ask you to go through with that particular case, but I would be discussing the role of tax jurisprudence which is presently there in India. With these few words for today, let me now hand over the session now to Ritvika for her to give us an insight into the case law that was given to her in the previous session. I think Ritvika is here.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So with these few words, I hand it over to you, right? I'm now muting myself, and I hand over the session to Ritvika. You can go ahead. Thank you very much. And I would like everyone to first listen to what Ritvika has to say. And if there are some, somebody has unmuted themselves, Anish, right? So I would like everyone to first listen to what she has to say and also record the case law, what she is going to speak about, and take the important points on that particular case law, because it's going to take about 5 to 8 minutes for her to complete her total points. She will give you the facts of the case and the judgment of that particular case. And she would also discuss that why the doctrine of pith and substance, which was there under FN Balsara's case, why it has now been overridden by this particular case law. Right? I think Ritvika, you can start, please.
Okay, sir. So, good afternoon to everyone present in this meeting. So, one thing before I would just start the presentation, if there's any issue with my like audio or anything, anyone can just interrupt me in between so that I can repeat the point. So, just in brief, as Aditya Kinger has already stated the case of State of Bombay versus FN Balsara, just to give it in one sentence, like what was held in that case after the application of this doctrine of pith and substance was that the state can regulate what is being sold within the country. So that is what was held in the State of Bombay versus FN Balsara. So now that has been overruled in another case, that is Synthetics and Chemicals Limited and others versus State of UP and others. So I've been assigned to present on this particular case, and the citation I'll post it in the chat box. So basically, this said writ petition, as by the name itself clearly suggests, it's been filed by the Synthetics and Chemicals Limited, which is a registered company in Bombay. And in this writ petition, it also involves a person named Mr. A.K. Roy, who is the director and the shareholder of this company. So, and this industry is basically concerned with the production or manufacture of ethyl alcohol, which is also known as rectified spirit. And this ethyl alcohol is actually would act as an industrial raw material for the further manufacture of other downstream products, like maybe in the field of medicine, etc. So they're not dealing with any final products, but they're just into the manufacture of an industrial raw material. And the respondent in this case is the state of Uttar Pradesh and the excise commissioner of Uttar Pradesh. So now the cause of action that has arose in this case was that in addition to the excise duty, which was already levied by the central government, excise duty and several other levies under various names like vend fee, transport fee, and almost 8 different kinds of levies have also been imposed by the state government. So, apart from the central government, even the state government is intervening in it and imposing 8 levies in such kind of industries. So now the main question that falls for consideration in this matter is that, like, whether these like vend fee, transport fee, almost 8 different kinds of fees in respect of this industrial alcohol under different legislations and rules in different states is valid or not, whether such an imposition by the state government is valid or not. So the Supreme Court in this case has taken a report into consideration, which was of the Alcohol Committee 1956. And this report has indicated 4 essential points. So I would like to deal with all these 4. So the first point was that it stated that since this industrial alcohol is an input for the production of other downstream products, it should be available at reasonable prices. Point number 1. Now, point number 2 was that it also stated that there should be uniform railway freight with respect to these industrial raw material. And the third one was larger capacities of molasses, etc., should be available, which is not to be considered for us right now. And the fourth essential point for us is that uniform taxation policies are essential for the development of these industries. So basically, in order to deal with this case, the Supreme Court has taken this report into consideration. Now, the Supreme Court is only concerned with the taxing power of the states in order to impose or levy, such kind of excise duty on this industrial alcohol, which is a raw material for other industries. Now, I'm going to deal with the contentions from both the parties. Now, the main contention on behalf of the industry, that is Synthetics and Chemicals Limited, was that it stated that the state legislature has no authority in view of entry 84 of list 1, that is a union list, and which is to be read with entry 51 of list 2, that is a state list, in order to impose such levies. Now, what is this entry 84 of list 1, entry 51 of list 2? Entry 84 of the union list, it's talking about the power of the central legislature in order to impose duties on excise of certain goods which are manufactured or produced in India. So in this entry, there are a list of goods which the central government can impose tax upon. So it comprises of petroleum, crude, high speed, diesel, natural gas, and several others. But the one for us to be considered in this one is tobacco and tobacco products. So the central government, central legislature can definitely impose tax upon these tobacco and tobacco products in this entry 84. Now, what is entry 51 of list 2, that is a state list, is that it's just the same. That is, it is the power of the state legislature in order to impose duties on, exercise of, certain goods which are manufactured or produced in India. And even in this entry, there are a list of goods. So the one for our purpose is that the alcoholic liquors, which is for human consumption. So in this entry, the word human consumption has to be taken into consideration by everybody. So the state legislature can only impose or levy tax upon alcoholic liquors, which is for the purpose of human consumption and not for the purpose of, not in cases where it is a raw material. So this contention has been made by this industry, and it stated that since this the alcohol that they are dealing with, since it does not fall within the ambit of alcoholic liquors for human consumption, it is only the center which has the authority under entry 84 of list 1 in order to tax upon it, and not the state legislature. So this was one of the main contention by the industry. And another contention which was made by this industry was that it has taken entry 8 into consideration, entry 8 of list 2 into consideration, and it stated that entry 8 of state list definitely deals with intoxicating liquors, but it stated that it only authorizes the state legislatures to enact laws to regulate. This word to be considered here, that is to regulate only. So this, the word regulate in this entry does not empower the state legislature to impose any tax upon it. Regulation does not mean they have to impose any levy. And so the various levies which have been imposed by the state legislature on this industrial alcohol could not be brought within the ambit of regulatory duties of the state legislature. So these two were like main contentions which have been made by Synthetics Limited. And I think if you read the case, which is of almost like 51 pages, you will come across a lot of contentions. So now I would also deal with the contentions on part of the state, that is state of Uttar Pradesh. Now, the main argument on behalf of the state was that it clearly stated that the state has the sole privilege in order to deal with this alcohol or alcoholic substances. And it stated that though the word human consumption is not mentioned, this ethyl alcohol which this industry is dealing in is a potential substance which could easily be converted into intoxicating liquors which would be fit for human consumption. So after a process, this ethyl alcohol would definitely be fit for human consumption. That is what the state was saying. And it stated that since it would become eligible for human consumption, it has the right to intervene and impose such kind of a tax. And another contention which was made by the state was that it has taken Article 47 of the Constitution into consideration. And it stated that Article 47 is talking about the duty of the state in order to raise the level of nutrition and the standard of living in order to improve public health. So by taking this Article 47 into effect, the state is stating that this article is authorizing the state in order to bring about certain prohibitions with respect to these intoxicating drinks or drugs, which would be injurious to health, except which would be used for medical purposes. That is an exception. But whatever is injurious to health, the state has, a power to impose tax upon it or, create prohibitions upon it. So these were the two contentions which was made by the respondent, that was state of UP. Now, the Supreme Court, after taking both these contentions into consideration, it has stated that since there's a clear demarcation of authority under various items, like in the three different lists, that is the union list, state list, and concurrent list, it stated that entry 8 of list 2, that is the state list, could not be invoked in this case in order to justify the 8 different types of levies which have been imposed by the state, only for the reason that this alcoholic liquors is not meant for human consumption. So, as with, we've discussed with respect to doctrine of pith and substance, that, sir has stated a point that, whenever a question arises as to, arises as to determination of whether a particular law relates to a particular subject or list, then the substance of the law will be analyzed by the courts. So the Supreme Court in this case has stated that since this industry was dealing with an industrial raw material, ethyl alcohol, for further production of other products, it is not involving human consumption, the aspect of human consumption. And so the state legislature does not have any power to impose levies upon these industries, and it is only the center which has the right to impose levies upon this raw material, industrial raw material. So that's it, sir. Hello.
Yeah. Great, Ritvika. You have done, yeah. You have done with a lot of research and other things that are there. The point of contention between the union and the states was made very clear in this. And if you want it, boys and girls, you will have a recording of it, and you can access that particular recording of what Ritvika has said, and you can also make your own conclusions regarding that particular case as she put forward, and why she also discussed at the end why the rule of pith and substance, which was discussed before, has been overruled in this particular case. And when it comes to the union list and the state list, she also talked about the various entries that have been made into both of them. Okay. So I don't say that we have dealt with it in detail, but I just want you to understand that there are certain doctrines which have been there before. But in income tax law, please understand one thing. When we talk about tax laws are always dynamic. Tax laws have never been static. When we go into our next topics and other things, please understand that when we talk about the Income Tax Act of 1961, or we talk about the Goods and Services Tax, that is the GST, the one thing that we should keep in mind is that the laws which were there in the last year may not be the laws which may be there in the current year. And the government is one of the few which always believes that a tax law that is there should always be dynamic, and a tax law should never be static, because tax laws should change according to time and according to the needs of the general public of that particular country. Tax laws are not made only for the rich or the super rich or the middle class or the lower middle class or upon the people who are poor. Tax laws are made on the basis of the needs of society. That is why the doctrine of pith and substance, which was a very valid law and went on for a longer period of time until it was questioned by this particular case. When you go ahead to many of the cases that we'll be going through as we get into tax laws, please understand that many of these particular judgments have been reversed. Why? Because these set situations that have come into tax laws have made it impossible for the law to again go back to the old laws that are there. Because some of the old laws in taxation have become redundant. And when they become redundant, then those laws will surely be questioned. And when you have a law which keeps changing every year, then it would become much more logical for us as students to understand that the governing laws of tax can always be questioned by anyone under as a citizen of this country, because you can also question a particular law under income tax. Just to give you a simple example, I'll go to the tax jurisprudence part of it. Boys and girls, let us take that a road is laid in front of your house. When a road is laid in front of your house, please do not think that it is the great corporator or the MLA or the MP of that particular area who has used the money that is there and then he has got the road done. Please understand that you have contributed to the working of India directly or indirectly by paying taxes. When you have paid these taxes directly or indirectly to the government's duty is to provide you with a road, right? Now what happens is the road is built, right? You know that generally roads are built in India when they feel a need for it, like when a member of parliament is coming, or when a big officer is coming for an inauguration, you generally see that the roads are generally laid. When the general public ask for it, these roads are never laid, please. Kindly understand that when a road in front of your house does not work properly, like they laid the road within a day or two, or with a rain like what is now going on in Hyderabad, the road has been spoiled due to whatever reasons. Now, how many people go to the municipality and then ask them that, look, sir, I paid you the tax amount that is there, but you are not providing me with a basic thing like a street light. In front of my house, there is a street light. The street light is not working anymore, right? How many of us have gone and questioned the concerned authority of the municipal or whatever is there that, look, I am paying this municipal tax to you every year and I pay direct and indirect taxes to you. What are you doing? Is it not your duty at least to provide me with a lamp so that when I walk on the road that is there, there should be visibility? This is where the people of this particular country should understand that you, as a citizen of this country, have a right, because you have a right as a taxpayer of this country to ask the government, sir, when I have paid taxes to you, where did my money go? Where have you utilized it? I pay property tax. I pay municipal property tax to the government. What is the duty of it? It should provide me with basic amenity. What is amenity? Drinking water, drainage facility, road, and street lights. These are the four things. Generally, when a street light is, it gets spoiled, or the fuse of it does not work, I only say, look, this light is not working. But how many of us walked up to the nearest municipal community hall, which is there in your area, and made a complaint that, this particular thing should not be done? Why I'm putting these things in front of you? Because today's topic talks about the rights of a particular consumer or the rights of an assessee under the Income Tax Act of 1961. When you pay taxes to the government, what is the role of the government towards you? That is why I would like you to go through with the case of CIT, the Commissioner of Income Tax versus Shelley Products, because again, you will come back on Monday and then tell me that this 7 principles that were laid on the governance of tax jurisprudence has now been reversed again, because somebody else has questioned that particular case again, and again CIT versus Shelley Products has been reversed. I want you to go through with CIT versus Shelley Products and also the reversal of that particular case which has been done. Because I want my students to understand this very clearly, is that tax laws are made for the people, and people can question tax laws whenever they do want to. How much of them are questioning it, I do not know. Because I'll tell you a simple instance and I'll go to the real core concept of tax jurisprudence. Boys and girls, you know very well that to run parliament, it takes about 1.5 crore every day to run parliament, please. 1.5 crore every day to run parliament, just to run parliament. Who pays for that particular money? It is you and me, the taxpayer. Point one. Second, many of the MLAs and MPs, that is the members of parliament, they do stay in houses. For those houses also, they are given many facilities, which is given from the taxpayers' money. They are given many allowances, which are given from the taxpayers' money. Boys and girls, the only thing that they have to pay is the electricity bill. And many of the members of parliament do not even pay the electricity bill, which accrues onto their name in the house that they stay with the taxpayers' money. Tax jurisprudence in other countries of the world like Australia, I'm quoting some because we have borrowed a lot of the tax principles from them. The tax principles that are there in Australia, because we have taken the GST from them, or the tax principles which are put up in Canada, and the tax principles which have been put up in the United States. If you take it, let me tell you this, that in the United States, income tax is an indirect tax. It is not a direct tax. In India, the payment of income tax is a direct tax. But if you go to the United States, the concept of taxation, that is income tax being paid by the people to the government, is an indirect tax. Why I'm telling you this is to make you understand that in foreign countries, these countries that I just now told you, when the taxpayers' money is used, boys and girls, it is told to the taxpayer, how did the money come to the government? How did the government use that particular money for the people? How did they use it? And what is the development work that has been taken by the government, and whether the money that was collected, the taxpayers' money, was it used for development or sometimes for a contingency? Like, there may be floods, there may be drought, there may be a famine. For what purpose it has been used is very clearly mentioned. But if you come to India, the concept of tax jurisprudence is the government can ask you where did the money come from, but you cannot question the government as to where did you spend my money. Where did you spend the money? How did you spend the money? And for what reason did you spend it? We as the taxpayers of this country cannot question the government, please. That is where the tax jurisprudence part of it comes into being. So, as you know very well, that in 2019, you know that we had Mr. VG Siddhartha. Mr. VG Siddhartha, I think you'll understand it as I go ahead. I think many of them know that Mr. V.G. Siddhartha was also known as a coffee king of India, because he was the person who brought out this particular stores called Coffee Day. You might have heard about it, right? He brought out a particular brand called Coffee Day, in which at least one of us and most of us would have gone at least once to Coffee Day and then sat down in that particular coffee day to have a cold coffee or a hot coffee, or as the coffee's names are general given me, like a cappuccino, mochaccino, or whatever is there, because I understand coffee as coffee itself, right? So they are given different names, and he was considered to be a person who branded the name of coffee in India. Now, why we are discussing about him, right? In July of 2019, Mr. V.G. Siddhartha, the owner of Coffee Day, went missing. When he went missing, boys and girls, 2 days after that, his body was found in a river, right? His body was found in a river, and upon him, they found a suicide note. He had written a suicide note, which was there in his pocket. He had driven to the outskirts of Bengaluru, and then he had committed suicide. Now, the suicide of Mr. V.G. Siddhartha, because why I want to give a little brief on him is because please understand that Mr. V.G. Siddhartha was one of the few persons who encouraged a lot of young people to become entrepreneurs. He encouraged a lot of young people to become businessmen, to make startups, and he would fund these particular startups by giving them money as a venture capitalist. When he was doing all these things, what happened was that he used to say that we should never fear anything. We should become an entrepreneur in this country, because the government cannot provide jobs to everyone. See, we generally tell the government is not able to provide jobs. The government cannot provide jobs to all the people in this country. That's why many of them go on to become entrepreneurs, businessmen. They try to do a lot of other things also. If jobs were the only thing, then in this country, everybody will be only searching for a job. Because the most talented person, please understand one thing in India is, the most talented person works under somebody. The least talented person that is there in terms of degrees becomes the owner. I want to share a small instance with you of Mr. J.R.D. Tata. Mr. J.R.D. Tata wanted a managing director for Tata Steel. When he wanted a managing director for Tata Steel, many of them applied from foreign countries. They had so many degrees. One had a CA, one had foreign degrees, and so on. They applied to Mr. J.R.D. Tata. Mr. J.R.D. Tata chose a third-class BCom graduate. And many of them asked Mr. Tata, what Mr. Tata, you have taken a third-class BCom graduate as a CEO and managing director of your company. You have got so many people with MBA, this, that, they've got so many degrees and so on. He said, for my business to run, I don't require degrees. For my business to run, I require common sense. Please understand that there are people who are running organizations today who have basic knowledge. They have only basic knowledge. They don't have Wharton degrees. They don't have Harvard degrees and so on. But to run a business, you basically require common sense. V.G. Siddhartha was in that particular genre where he believed that you should look into all these aspects and you should not fear anyone and you should become an entrepreneur in this country. Why I'm telling you this? Now I'll come to the main point. Now I told you that he committed suicide and a note was found in his pocket. When a note was found in his pocket, the police accessed that particular note. And when he died, most of the industry was shell shocked because they didn't expect such a thing from Mr. V.G. Siddhartha, because he was a genuine businessman. He was a very good man. He would always believe that business would make India great. And with the population that they had, it would make India great. But he went and committed suicide. When they accessed the suicide note, it was written by the great coffee king. The reason of my suicide is not family duress, not any other duress, but economic duress. I have been faced by economic duress due to harassment by tax officials, and that is the main reason for my extreme action. This was written in the suicide note of Mr. VG Siddhartha. Now, this was a grave allegation that was made against CBDT, that is the Central Board of Direct Taxes. And in this, the Central Board of Direct Taxes generally looks at ensuring compliance. I think you understand what is compliance. That is, people should comply by paying taxes to the government. They should comply by paying taxes to the government. And to ensure this particular compliance, we have CBDT, the Central Board of Direct Taxes. Now, if you look at the case of Mr. VG Siddhartha, it shows that in this country, we talked about tax evasion. I didn't go into the real aspect, but we talked about tax avoidance and we talked about tax evasion. Boys and girls, have we talked about tax terrorism? You might have heard terrorism in various ways. Somebody puts a bomb on the other, that is considered to be terrorism. But you can kill a person with economic duress. I think you can understand. You're students of the law of contracts. You understand duress better than I do. When economic duress is taking place, in the economic duress, we are not challenging the person by hitting him physically. We are hitting the person mentally. So where does the concept of tax jurisprudence stand over here? So in a fiscal jurisdiction, what was questioned was that is the CBDT and the tax department promoting tax terrorism in this country, wherein certain things do happen and the administrators are not taking a lenient view, nor are they giving that person some time to justify the reasons for the tax evasion or tax avoidance or whatever is there. They are not giving the person a chance to justify it. This is a recent 2019 thing which has happened, and the family members of Mr. VG Siddhartha have filed a case before the courts asking that these income tax officials who have mentally harassed him should be brought under the law and a criminal case must be booked against such people. Why? Because what is happening is suddenly, now just to make you understand it. Now what happens is suddenly in the middle of a particular year, the government makes a change to the tax law. The government has got the rule of ordinances to change tax laws. What the government does is it changes the tax law. It may sometimes change it to the better of the people also, and sometimes it may be changed to the individual facing that particular problem and it does not know that the law has been made. For example, now I had told you in my previous sessions that the income tax department decided the date of income tax returns to be filed on July 31st. They had extended the date. Recently, again, the government has extended the income tax date of filing, that is filing all your returns with the income tax to November. I didn't know about it. Let me be frank with you. I did not know about it because I was not getting a newspaper at home. So then what happened after a day of that particular rule coming, next day I was watching CNBC TV 18 and they said in that no, the government has given more time to the taxpayer to pay the tax. I did not know about it. I did not know about it. Then you may come to the particular point. Ignorance of the law is not an excuse. But under the Income Tax Act, please understand that the tax administration which is administering tax to us must also understand their responsibility of letting the people know when, what, how, and if new ordinances are coming, it should be known to the public. If new rules are coming, the public should know about it. And they should be given some time to understand the relevant tax law, to know how it affects him, and then to seek legal opinion upon it, and then try to pay it. this is a problem now that we are facing in income tax that is there. And that is why Bentley had said in 2016 that the individual in any country should understand his rights, especially a taxpayer, because he said that in the taxpayer that is there, every individual does not read tax, every individual does not understand tax. So what you should do, you should make it in such a way that the lawmakers who make the tax laws should look at that it is policy oriented and it should not be politically oriented. The laws that are there in taxation must be policy oriented and not politically oriented. Aditya, you have a question?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
My question is that, sir, mostly if you look at, when the government had decided to buy some aircrafts or anything like that, they
Yes.
want a huge expenditure.
Yeah.
So in that case, in many cases, people had filed the case before the apex court stating that why the government did that, why the particular parties were chosen. But in all the cases, as far as my knowledge goes, the court had rejected it on the ground of policy matter cannot be discussed or adjudged in a court of law. So, sir, how with this approach of the apex court, we can say that citizens should be aware about their rights, because ultimate forum to question it is, as far as I know, is the apex court. So,
right.
How far
But when
is
it
that
comes
possible,
to
sir?
Aditya, when it comes to income tax, please, you will be learning as we go ahead that even the apex court, Aditya, and any other courts that are there have always been very favorable to the SSE. They understand the trauma of an SSE. They understand the trauma that an SSE goes through, and they also look at how the assessments are being made. For example, Aditya, just to make you understand it, that every country generally has one form of taxation, please. But you know, in the year 2020 and 21, which we call as the financial year or the assessment year, the government this time has given you two tax slabs, please. One with exemptions and one without exemptions, please. Now, you and I, because we are educated and we are doing a little bit of taxes now, we are now going to go into that only in the next sessions. That is, we are going to understand the Finance Act, what has been done, and what is the difference between the previous, what you say, with exemption tax rules and without exemption tax rules. Now, you go and ask any other individual who does not know tax, please. Do you know that we have got two taxes? He'll say, boss, I don't know anything about it. Let me go to a chartered accountant or let me go to an income tax consultant and he will tell me what is right for me. Most of my friends, when they file their returns, they come to me and then they ask me, it was easy before. Now, why did they bring in two tax slabs? Two tax slabs, I think you understood it. Two different modes of taxation. Please understand that under the income tax, under the tax laws, the courts have always taken a lenient view on the SSE, though they have said that policy matters are there, as Aditya rightly said, in the Rafale deal and so on. But when it comes to tax, the government and the governments have been giving tax jurisdictions problems. Tax laws are being framed from time to time by the government. And the people have questioned it. And when they have questioned it, they have also been given time by the authorities and also by the courts. The courts have also questioned the government. How do you make such tax laws which are draconian? Certain tax laws have been called draconian by the apex court, where they felt that these taxes were, we had double taxation. That means you already pay tax to the government and upon that again you pay tax upon it. So the government said, where did this concept of double taxation start coming in? You are taxing the individual already in one way and again you are putting another tax upon him. The courts have questioned. So in the income tax cases, please, the apex court has also sided, I can say, equally with the government on policy matters and equally with the individuals also. When we go ahead and then we learn the concepts better, you'll be able to see there that sometimes the courts have differed and deferred. Please use my look at my language. Have differed and deferred on taxation provisions that have been put by various governments. And certain times they have also called it draconian also. Like simply, though the case may still be sub judice in the court, when Mr. Arvind Kejriwal brought out that liquor tax, an extra tax on liquor, people have said it was draconian and they filed a case. The case was accepted by the Delhi High Court. Right, by that time, the said government has also withdrawn after a month or so, they have withdrawn that particular tax that was put on alcoholic products. So let us, in this particular case, what Aditya said was right, that policy matters are there, but in certain cases, even the courts have decided on this particular thing in favor of the taxpayer too. I would like to conclude with this particular thing on tax jurisprudence, and I would like everybody to go through with the particular cases that whenever we look at tax administration and tax jurisprudence, it says that when you're looking at the rights of the taxpayer, you should understand one thing is that you should look at the behavior of the people also. You may think that, and I'm now teaching you management. I'm not teaching you management. I'm teaching you jurisprudence. And when jurisprudence comes in, customs are a part of it. Tax laws also look into customs. Tax laws also look into benefits. Tax laws also look into behavior. Because some of the times, I'll just tell you how it happens. You know, in an area which I live, the roads, because of the rains, recent rains, have all become waterlogged and all the drainages were overflowing. So what happened? The people in the area in which I live decided that they will not pay property tax to the government. Why? They said that, we are not paying property tax because the government is not even giving us the basic amenities. Now what happened was, this has gone to the government, right? Because somebody would be there who will be related to the government or the corporator or somebody that is there. Immediately next day, the work was done, please. Next day. Now the behavior of the taxpayer also is very important. What Bentley says is, if the taxpayer pays tax to the government out of his free will, that is a great concept of tax jurisprudence. Out of his free will, he says, yes, it is my duty to pay the tax, and he pays it. That's great. But sometimes the taxpayer feels, if I pay this tax, who is getting the benefit of it? I am not getting anything from it at all. And that is why the tax jurisprudence which has been brought out in this country says that you should understand the role of the taxpayer's rights. And every individual should know his rights, either from a direct tax perspective or from an indirect tax perspective. Now let us come to the last concept of tax jurisprudence with regard to the present laws. I'm sorry, please, one moment. Yeah. One moment. One moment, please. Yeah, am I audible now? Boys and girls, am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes,
Because suddenly there was, I told you now we didn't have power from the last 2 days at home, so I'm doing it through my mobile. So that's why there was a phone call. So in the middle there was an issue. Fine. Now why I'm telling you about this particular concept of 2019 is that if you look at the LPG, that is liberalization, privatization, and globalization. What has now happened is that in these three aspects, the concept of tax also has to grow in the same way as the concept of liberalization, globalization, and the privatization. Now, what has happened is that keeping LPG in mind, I think I don't need to tell you what it is once again. Keeping LPG in mind, many of the foreign companies that are there landed in India to open their businesses in India so that they would understand the people, because having such a huge population, they felt that, even 10% of the population, if they could become the, what do you say, they could become their customers, it would become very easy for them and they would get a worldwide base, a customer base, which is one of the largest in the world along with China. But what has happened is, as they landed in India and they started their business, they have found one very important thing. The thing is that the tax jurisprudence of India says something and does something. That means what? Now let's take the case of Vodafone. Vodafone is still fighting a case in the Indian courts on a concept called retrospective taxation. What is retrospective taxation? The concept of retrospective taxation is that you come today and then the government says we are opening up the economy, we are doing everything. You welcome all the FDI, foreign direct investment, into India with open arms. When they land up in India and they start their business, they set up the business totally. And then what they do is that they work for 2 or 3 years. Suddenly the taxman gets a brainwave. And then he says, sir, this was done from there. This tax did not apply to them. Now I have found out that there was a loophole in the law. Now we are going to plug that particular loophole and ask that particular person to pay the tax. Suddenly, after 4 or 5 years of this business being in India, boys and girls, then what happens is one day a tax notice comes to the person. What is that tax notice telling you? Sir, 5 years before you came into this country, and from that time, in these 5 years, you have not paid the tax. That person would say, sir, I have been paying the tax for the past 5 years. Then he says, no, whatever tax you paid is okay. But at that time, we did not tell you about this tax law. So since this tax law was not followed at that time, today what you do is now you start paying the tax again. What does this become now, please? It becomes retrospective. That means from the last 5 years, you should start paying now. Boys and girls, let me conclude by telling you that like this, the government that is there and the tax department have put a suo motu case of 42,000 crores on Vodafone. The court is still deciding on that particular case in the AGR case. I think you might have seen it now, right? And the Supreme Court is now saying that, what is now going to happen? The Supreme Court is saying that shall we ask them to pay? Now, when they ask them to pay, Vodafone said, we don't have the money to pay because of your retrospective tax laws, right? Now what they say is after another 5 years, another retrospective taxation comes. Now you put it, there is tax jurisprudence in this country. There is nothing at all. So Vodafone said, sir, if you are going to ask me to pay the 42,000 crores at one time, I am now going to shut down my business here, apply for insolvency, and I'm going to leave this country. And then afterwards, whatever happens, let it be done. Now the central government woke up. Now they have filed a plea before the Supreme Court saying that we will give 20 years. We will give 20 years time if you want to repay that particular amount along with a little bit of simple interest, not compound interest, please. Now, if you are going to open up laws like this, right, and you are going to suddenly bring in administrative and statutory protections, which you had forgotten at that time, and you are not doing it, that becomes a very big problem. Boys and girls, when you go ahead and then you start reading retrospective taxation, the next concept is going to be on retrospective taxation, wherein you need to learn this subject now, ADR, alternate dispute resolution. Am I audible, please?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, sorry, I'll just finish it. I'm done. Okay, so what I say is the tax authorities historically follow that, have followed one thing in India, and I quote, when you are in doubt, file an appeal. Just do one thing, file an appeal, right? And today I can say with all due respect that the tax administration in India is one of the most prolific litigants in India, right? And let me bring a fact in front of you. The proportion of cases that have been resolved in favor of the tax administration is only 11.5%. In favor of the tax administration is 11.5% as against the global average of 65%. Tax administrators in India have won only 11.5% of the cases against them, whereas in the world it is 65%. So that is why, please, no wonder in this country, India has the largest number of tax disputes and a high quantum of taxes are locked up in litigation process. That is why we are now seriously looking at two things, and a complete ADR mechanism to look at the Indian tax landscape and to sort out cases. Also, whether tax cases could be brought before Lok Adalats, that is also being looked into. And you remember that there was a committee that was set up, the first ADR body for direct taxes by looking at tax jurisprudence was set up in 1976 on the recommendations of the Vancho committee. Right, on the basis of the Vancho committee, it was done. Right. With these few words, I would like to wrap up for today here. Monday, I have just 1 or 2 points to discuss. We'll do that and kindly look into that particular concept of tax jurisprudence with the case of CIT versus Shelley Products. Give me one moment, please.